Hi, my name's Amanda. I am a coach and a trance channel, and every single week I channel beings of light so they can bring forward wisdom and guidance for all of you. This week, a collective from Atlantis came forward, and they want to talk about purpose in a very unique way. Many of us are on a path to discovering or realizing what our purpose is inside of this lifetime. And the process of uncovering that for ourselves gives us a sense of purpose in and of itself. And then many of us feel like we don't know what our purpose is or don't have one. And this can sometimes create a sense of pain or discomfort inside of ourselves. And the process of navigating that also gives us a sense of purpose in a very interesting and weird way. This is a fascinating perspective and conversation around what purpose can look and feel like for many of us and how it can be different depending on what we're going through. And I really hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
Greetings. We are so happy to be here with all of you today. We understand that there is much fascination from where we come from, and so we desire to speak into a little bit about what life was like inside of Atlantis, because we desire for you to know a little bit about what the culture was really like in order to fully understand our perspective on this matter today, because we desire to speak into the notion that purpose is birthed from a desire to achieve something that brings you joy. Because the truth be told, it is not always so. Oftentimes, purpose is simply a desire or intention that we have for the time being. And therefore, our sense of purpose can be dictated according to what we desire from the current experience and where we desire to move forward instead. Therefore, the notion of purpose oftentimes gets conflated with what we deem to be the big overarching pathway inside of a lifetime, where in reality, you live inside of a purpose that can be different from moment to moment inside of a day. And depending on what you are being challenged with in any particular moment in time, you are dedicating a sense of purpose inside of escaping this experience or deepening inside of it. And the lifetime inside of Atlantis that we desire to speak into briefly is one of immense conflict and chaos when it comes to a specific purpose to instill a sense of power inside of a dynamic where there were conflicting ideologies at play. On the one hand, there was a group that desired to oversee a sense of notoriety inside of their roles inside of Atlantis. And on the other side, there was a group that desired to instill a sense of peace and belonging and connectivity. And unfortunately, these two sides were at odds with one another. And we desire to speak into why this is, because it lends itself to this greater conversation that we desire to bring forward today. The reason why there was so much conflict at this specific moment in time that we are discussing here is because these two ideologies did not see eye to eye with one another. On the one hand, there was a group that desired to instill a sense of foreboding because they desired to steer in a direction that required of themselves the ability to lead from a place of fear, instilling fear in those around them, because without this sense of fear, there would not be the ability to guide in the way they desired to. And the reason why this group desired to lead in this way at this particular time is because they sensed the ability to do so. You see, Atlantis was a place of so much forward thinking, the ability to develop technology through the use of energetic advancements, and the power of the intellect grew quickly there. Because there was this fascination with forward momentum, there were many people inside of Atlantis that wanted to pay their tribute to it. because for them, being recognized for their achievements meant something grand for them, for that name recognition and for the ability to say, I did that and I contributed in this way. And therefore, there was more and more of a need for this, for those who desire to lend their hand in a way that would not only facilitate a forward advancement for the society as a whole, but also granted them very much achievement in doing so. And the ability to validate their own hard work felt oddly satisfying in a way that simply a job well done didn't feel like enough anymore. And not everybody inside of Atlantis felt this way. There were many that desired to instill a sense of group dynamic where when they contributed to the betterment of the society, they were contributing to the betterment of their own sense of self. And there was nothing more needed other than this, other than the knowledge that they were contributing to something greater than them. And they did not require the validation inside of themselves. And so there was a chasm formed between these two ideologies. And those souls who found themselves pushing for a hierarchical way of displacement, of numbered systems, and the ability to advance up inside of the pecking order to a place of high acknowledgement, being able to foresee the roles of those beneath them and receive the recognition they desired to. This was often sought out where it wasn't before. And those who desire to maintain a sense of togetherness, collective thinking, us over I, got left in the wayside because they did not push as hard as they could have for what they wanted. They did not know how to make their voices heard because they did not understand the desire to be louder than the rest. And those who desire to be the loudest were those that pushed the hardest for what they wanted. And ultimately, what they wanted was to satisfy a longing inside of them, to be recognized in some capacity. And so, what started to happen was that rather than developing technology for the sense of the community, they developed technology that would further their own desire to be represented at the top of the pyramid. And so you see, there was much movement in a way that did not facilitate the betterment of the collective, but facilitated the betterment of each individual that worked on it and that participated in it and that desired something from it to fulfill something for themselves inside of it. And the reason why we wanted to touch on this dynamic is because this is often playing out inside of you, inside of this lifetime, the dynamic that you are undergoing in every scenario you find yourself in from day to day. On the one hand, there's the part of you that desires to instill a sense of well-being inside of you and to know that you are doing everything that you can to make forward momentum for yourself inside of this lifetime, because if you cannot do so, you will be left in the wake. And yet there's another aspect of you that sees beyond this, that sees that the betterment of the collective is going to serve you just as much. And yet it does not take precedence, because if you cannot be self-serving to a certain degree, you cannot help the society at all, because there's a part of you that needs to serve yourself first in order to do so. And so there are these two parts of you at war with one another, just as they were back in times of Atlantis, perhaps playing out to a more diminished degree as it was back then. And so there are these two conflicting senses of purpose inside of you. The purpose to feel like you are making forward progress inside of a direction that will create a sense of well-being inside of you and a desire to forego the collective in order to do so to a certain degree. And on the other hand, there's a part of you that yearns for a more peaceful existence inside of this planet. And to be able to create something that helps the collective feels very purposeful to you. And so, how do you bring these two together? How do you create something for the betterment of the planet while at the same time ensuring that you are taken care of and satisfied? We desire for you to know that sometimes it is not possible to do both at the same time, and that it is not expected of you to do so. You come here to make your own choices and to make your own decisions and to learn from each one. And each choice you make lends itself to a different experience inside of it. How can you see that there is no right and wrong in this? It is challenging to look back at history and say, well, if that person had chosen themselves above everybody else, things would have gone differently. And if this person had chosen the collective over themselves, things would have worked out differently and perhaps better. And I would not be in this situation had they chosen something different. And yet here you are struggling with the same thing at this moment in time inside of your life. How can you see that each person inside of their own role in history has grappled with this same dissonance inside of them, deciding on the purpose that best serves them in each individual moment and choosing which road to move down? This is ultimately at play inside of you in each moment, in each and every single day. And we do not necessarily have advice for you other than to show yourself a little bit of compassion, because you look to beings that existed in times of old and you say to yourself, they had so much, and yet they couldn't make it work. Well, how are you supposed to? And we desire for you to know that you're not. You're not supposed to know. You're not supposed to do any one thing while you're here. You're simply supposed to be with what is in front of you and do your best. It is not wrong to put yourself first, although it may feel that way sometimes. It is not wrong to expect others to put you first, where you cannot extend them the same courtesy. Every single one of you is doing their best in each moment in time. And that is ultimately what you can expect of you and them in turn, simply to do your best. And in time, doing your best will lend itself to what you need most. And if in one particular point in time, what you need most is to serve those ahead of you, that is your purpose in that moment. And we ask you to embrace it for everything that it is and ride it out until it no longer feels resonant for you. And if what you want most is to further yourself, to see where that guides you and leads you, takes you, what that feels like for you, we encourage you to follow that too. Everyone that lived in Atlantis followed their own path that gave them a sense of purpose. And in that way, nothing has really changed. And we are not trying to paint a picture of eventual destruction of this planet in the way that Atlantis faced, because we see many of you who desire to do your best inside of this world and create a beautiful place for your children to be birthed into and grow up inside of, in a way that many individuals inside of Atlantis do not hold quite as dear as you do. We see so much hope ahead for you, and we understand that it is difficult to recognize that at this time, but perhaps that is simply part of your purpose too, is to recognize the dissonance between how you feel inside and what you see around you and what you believe is possible for each in turn. Because peace is available to you regardless of the chaos going on in the world around you. And there is peace inside of the world around you, even if you choose not to see it that way. Therefore, you really do choose to make the observation that you desire to hold dear inside of you. And it is the observation that you choose to hold dear inside of you that ultimately dictates your purpose moving forward. And so, what we would like to point forward for you is a way of seeing you in a new way. For it is not the world outside of you that dictates what your purpose is inside of this lifetime. It is your observations on the world around you that does, because ultimately you get to choose your perspective. You get to choose how you see the world around you. And if all you see is peace, then perhaps it feels less self-serving to choose you first. And if what you see is pain and suffering around you, then it feels much more challenging to do so. Do you see this? Do you see how it is all perspective at the end of the day? As is purpose. Purpose is simply perspective. And you get to choose what your purpose is along with the perspective that you hold. Those who did not survive Atlantis, those who witnessed its destruction and fell inside of it, have chosen to come back and rebuild what they could not at the time contribute to. And perhaps some of you are here today desiring to rebuild what could have been, or what was once live inside of those cities. But in order to be able to do that, you are going to have to choose your purpose wisely, because ultimately those around you may not see eye to eye with you, even if you have their best interests at heart. Therefore, it really does take a large degree of communication and a willingness to see the innocence in another's perspective that may be different from yours. And you do not necessarily need to see eye to eye in order to create something grand. You simply have to be willing to compromise and to show one another respect, the way many of the beings in Atlantis chose not to. We feel connected to so many of you, and we desire to know that your memories of your time in Atlantis live on inside of you, and you hold all of the wisdom, all of the coding inside of you to rebuild what you remember of it. You must simply choose to turn in and ask yourself, what is my biggest purpose right now? And how do I desire to pursue it? And whatever comes forward for you, I desire for you to know that that is exactly what's needed most. We love you deeply and dearly, and we wish you so much love on your path ahead. Thank you.